And I really wanted to share something that we haven't talked much about. And so I put together a very mostly a slideshow that's mostly images that we'll run through just kind of for fun. And then I'll say quite a bit that I'm excited about games. Let me see if I can find the right layout here. We're calling this It's More Than a Game. And when Karen and I were chatting about what I might do today, I was thinking about this and reminded of some of Peter Mortola's work about when play becomes real. And, one of the challenges of being a therapist who works with young people is legitimizing what we do, that we're not just playing. And Violet would talk a lot about that. So just wanted to bring Violet into the room, one of my favorite photos of her. And I'm just going to kind of go through some of these. And part of what I want to have you notice is that when we do our trainings, what I don't bring with me when I go abroad are games. And so it was really great to prepare for this because we do lots with cards and puppets and clay. I'll be seeing these lovely faces in Italy in a couple of weeks. And music. There's another one of Violet, couldn't resist. Karen and Sue, the gang, Claire, some folks in Kyrgyzstan. So part of what I'm doing is making my transition of going from online trainings to in-person. And it's exciting and it'll be really interesting to see what things are like. Some of you, and I couldn't resist putting an old photo of my daughter in here. So kids love games, just like they usually love art and drawing. And so what I want to tie this to is the therapeutic process. And when we think about building sense of self, these are the steps. These are the things that when we're looking at how do we do that? How do we help people get to know themselves better? And it's using the senses, body, voice, breath, and all the things we do, defining the self, creating situations where clients can have some mastery, using imagination, making choices, boundaries, humor, how we're playful, how we can own projections, and how we use power and control. So I thought what I would do just for a quick discussion is to look at how different kinds of games help us strengthen sense of self. And I'm going to have us do a very short activity in the chat at the end, just so you can think about the games that you enjoy using with your clients and how they fit theoretically to the model. So let me just flip here to the next slide. So just to put this in some context, so when we look at the steps of the therapeutic process, here they are. And, Violet would always say, after we develop a relationship, some thread of an I-thou relationship, the rest of these steps are nonlinear. They don't have to go in a certain order, but we're doing all of these things throughout the session. And I really love what Karen said about that we want to plan a session without an agenda, right? That we don't quite know when we work with clay or when we play a game, what the really big takeaway is going to be. Is there going to be some emotional identification expression? Are we going to be really working on the relationship in a very obvious way? Are we going to be really creating and facilitating an experience where there's going to be some increase in contact? And even we can use games with families and with parents, which we do quite a lot. And so let me just sort of go through how this might look. So when we establish an I-thou relationship, we can do that all the time, but some obvious ways are games where we're getting to know each other, like the Ungame, 20 questions, the kids' book of questions, where we're, answering things about ourselves, what we would do in certain situations, the talking, feeling, doing game. These are really non-competitive, just ways that we can connect, make contact, that are fun, that aren't just sort of eyeball to eyeball kind of dialogue that we might have in talk therapy. An example of ways we can build sense of self with a game or an activity to help with power and control would be like cops and robbers or playing doctor, where usually a child, at least early in the relationship, will take the more powerful role, right? Where they're the cop and we're the robber, and they're going to put us in jail, or they're the doctor and we're the patient. And it's not like a board game, but it is a game. It's a situation where it's somewhat predictable what's going to happen, and it's fun. There's some exaggeration to that. I really am always on the lookout for things to do, games that are cooperative rather than competitive. And of course, I can't demonstrate this one online, but you know those big exercise balls that you can sit on? I do a game, and this is fantastic with kids with ADHD or kids that are very competitive. And we take that ball and we throw it back and forth, but we kind of slap it where it gets to bounce one time. And we count how many times we can do it. And it's really fun, because instead of hitting each other with the ball or winning somehow, we really have to connect and kind of get into a groove, almost like if you're playing tennis, not scoring and just, kind of volleying back and forth, but you only get one bounce. And this is a really interesting way I have found to start a session or end a session that can enhance the eye-thou relationship. And of course, the breath and some movement and some laughter and humor and some limits and boundaries too. Once in a while, I have a kid who like bounce the ball so hard it'll hit a lamp or hit something breakable. And, I get to say, there's not many rules here, but you can't hurt me. You can't hurt my office. You can't hurt my stuff. You can't hurt myself. So we need to make sure that we're doing this way so that nothing gets hurt. Some other types of games that involve the body, breath, movement, awareness, things like tag, which you can do in the office, or using the encounter bats or the batakas, playing charades. There's a great game here called Kids on Stage, which is like a little mini version of charades where you pick a card and it's either an animal or an activity or an object. So that's a really interesting kind of game to play too. Then my personal favorite are aggressive energy games, games that crash, make noise, get messy, are kind of surprising. Things like Splat or Whack-A-Mole, even like throwing, there's a game here called Cornhole where you throw bean bags into a hole. Things where when we're doing aggressive energy work, we're thinking of gross motor. When you have an image of a child on the floor having a tantrum, there's a lot of movement with arms and legs, and maybe some noise, maybe some crashing and banging and breaking. So things like that are in a safe container. There's a spirit of fun and exaggeration. And those games are not that easy to find. You have to really be on the lookout. Kind of a similar category, which is a little bit of a mashup of what I would consider an aggressive energy game that I use quite a lot, are games that I use for kids who have a lot of anxiety. Jenga, if you're familiar with Jenga, it's like there's a bit of tension as it's getting higher and higher and higher, and then it's going to break. And it's really interesting to see how over time kids with anxiety get more comfortable as they're dealing with that anticipatory stress of that thing's going to come crashing down and make a big noise, and who's going to be the one who's going to knock it over. And again, it's not too terribly competitive. There is sort of a winner, but it's much more cooperative of how high can we get this thing to go. There's an old game here called Don't Break the Ice, which again, there's some, plastic ice pick and these ice cubes in this lake. And so it's very much a gross motor kind of game. But, again, if you do it too hard, it could break the game. Just like with clay, if you use that rubber mallet too hard, somebody could get hurt. So there are some limits and boundaries. There's some containment, but we're still having a very contactful experience with the body and the breath, and the relationship is sort of building as we have to deal with limits and boundaries. Pick up sticks is another kind of fun anxiety game that's a little bit more like about fine motor, like looking, playing, scoring. And then the last category that I would consider are like transition or integration games. So Violet talked a lot about, after an intense session, how do you transition back to your world, right? It could be something simple like just a quick chat. Where are you going now? What are you going to have for dinner? But if you have 5 or 10 minutes, it can be really nice to say, okay, we're done with our drawing. We're done cleaning up. Let's play a game. And to, games like Uno or Connect Four, just kind of quick games that can smooth out the time and be kind of a fun activity that kids look forward to. Some kids, I can play games the whole session and there's enough therapeutic value in that, and they really enjoy it. Some kids really just want to play games. And I shouldn't use the word just, because there's all this value in playing games. And for other kids, it can just be like a little thing we do before or at the beginning or at the end of a session. And I'm reminded now of another big part of how we strengthen self with games, and that's about making choices. If you're working with a child who tends to be kind of timid or doesn't have a very strong voice or sense of self, making a choice of picking a game can be really a challenge. So even something so small as inviting a child in those last few minutes of the session to, let's play a game. What do you want to play? Oh, I don't know. You choose. Many kids are quick to turn their power over to an adult. So I can very nicely insist like, oh, no, it's your time. What do you want to do? Oh, I don't know. You pick. And you can see that some anxiety is building. A child who maybe doesn't want to make a mistake or hasn't really been afforded the opportunity to choose very many things in their life. So I might offer some external support, make a few suggestions. Well, how about in 10 minutes we could play Uno or Connect Four or pick up sticks, whatever. How about one of those? And of course, when the child chooses, there's no pushback. It's like, great, I love that game. Let's play that. And then finally, I wanted to just sort of, me and how much I love this image, just sort of plug all this into this idea that everything we do, whatever it is, whatever kind of media we're using, our goals are always to help clients make better contact and to strengthen sense of self. And games are, to me, as valid as any of the other media. We just don't talk about them very much. We get very focused on drawing and clay and puppets and things that somehow seem kind of more artistic. But a lot of kids don't want to do those things. A lot of kids want to come in and play games. And we can do that with full, validation that we're doing good work, that we're doing something very therapeutically valuable. And if sometimes parents are kind of like, what are you doing? And they're just playing games, like, really? And we can go back to, like, again, legitimizing what we do, that it's not just a game, that play becomes real, and that we're really working on the relationship and how, in some ways, to help people who struggle with winning or losing. And of course, when you struggle, no one likes to lose, but if you're crushed when you lose, then it really is an assessment metric about that someone's sense of self is extremely fragile. The last thing I want to share with you, and this is not about Violet's model, but it's about a parenting approach that Violet introduced me to. And this is based on the work of Aletha Solter. And she's a developmental psychologist. She worked with Piaget. She's Swiss, and she lives here in California now for many years. And she's written 5 books. Those of you who have trained with me know that I'm a big fan of her model, because when you work with kids, your parents are going to need to plug into some kind of parenting approach that is complementary to what we do in the therapy room so that they can do some of these things at home. And sorry, this slide's a little unclear, but this is from her 5th book, which is called Attachment Play. And it really takes about half of her book and puts a mini version of it onto this one slide. And here she describes types of play or games, how to do them, and then what's the therapeutic value. So lots of parents don't have time to read, but this is a really quick and helpful guide where you can kind of just look up a problem that you're having at home and what you can do so you can enjoy and have fun and attach and connect, even if you're really struggling with a behavior issue or some other difficulty. I think that's it. And so I'm going to stop sharing. And what I would love for you all to do is in the chat, pick one of your favorite games, just share the name of the game and see if you can put right next to it what the value is. Is it an aggressive energy game? Is it a game about the I-thou relationship, getting to know each other, or a game that helps with anxiety? What would you, and maybe I'll share that one slide one more time where you can actually see. Let me just get that slide back up in case you want to look at that one. So those are the ones that I mentioned.
We'll be sharing this. Well, if you share it, if you don't mind sharing it, we'll share it.
Oh, of course not. I'm happy.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lynn. And then this segment will be on YouTube. And
Great.
I think it's amazing.
Okay, so I'm going to start looking at the chat and read some of these aloud. Let's see what we've got here. I'm so excited about the international part of this because see what games are happening in other parts of it. Scrabble, because I love words. Talking, feeling, doing game, I, thou, and anxiety. Throw burrito, aggressive energy. Oh, I want that. Og on the bog, anticipatory suspense, regulation, humor, interaction. Uno for furthering the I, thou. Jenga questions, getting to know each other. Yeah, I've got Jenga truth or dare, which is a good one. Patrick's Once, a game with cards to tell a tale or a truth. Oh, that's another game that I love to play is two truths and a lie, and where you make three statements and the other person has to guess which one's the lie, which is a lot of fun. Thanks for putting Letha's name in the chat, John. Air hockey, about aggressive energy. Exploding kittens for anxiety. That's scary. that would make me sounds pretty funny though. Making a towel with glasses, frustration. These are fantastic. I'm not going to read all of them, but there's a lot. I'll let you all sort of go through these at your leisure so we can move on to the next presenter. But Karen, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Inviting me to do something today.
Thank you. And I love this topic. A lot of parents will say, when we were talking about this, I told Lynn this example of a client, a parent who said to me, I just spent this amount of money for my child to play Uno with a therapist, and it did nothing, and it's not Uno, as Lynn is saying so well. It's not about Uno. It's about, we don't know. I don't know. Did this therapist keep all this in mind behind whatever the game was? And so I think this is so helpful to tie it to the model. So thank you very much.